Alright, hello. This is my 21st lesson on a series of lectures on how the USA is starting a new Cold War with Russia. Alright, and today we're going to talk about Russia's poor military material readiness. Alright, so as an introduction, the USA is cooking up a new Cold War with Russia by using multiple attacks, multiple provocations, threats, get you again games, and the manufactured perception that Russia is intent on attacking the West, conquering European nations to rebuild its glorious empire of old. Right? Now, the notion that Russia is intent on attacking nations to the West is exaggerated bullshit, given one, Russia is overwhelmingly overmatched by NATO. B, in non-NATO nations, Russia would be marred down in blood-draining proxy wars against the West. C, Russia has little to gain by attacking the West, yet has much to lose. In an upcoming lecture, I'll examine the economies, GDPs, industries, and resources of the neighboring countries to the West, that neighbor Russia, right? And how there's nothing worth taking. And then there's much to lose right away. Russia will get whacked with UN economic sanctions. They'll immediately lose oil sales and gas sales. And D, Russia's piss poor military performance in its last three wars with Chechnya and Georgia. It lost the first war with Chechnya, and it took 10 years to settle the second war. E, Russia's poor military material readiness, which is the focus of today's lessons. Now, I know people are itching to attack. They're dying to attack. They're going to try to find some nitpick little thing. They're going to try to find some little fact-check thing, all right, and then shift all focus on it. Attack all the facts, all right, or attack none of them. Don't nitpick or STFU. All right. So first thing I want to discuss is fundamental understanding of military force, effective military force, and a big part of this is proper organization and utilization of resources. So I teach this in my very first lesson in sociology. I cover some of the basic theories in sociology, one of which is conflict theory. And in my discussion of conflict theory, I mentioned that half of all military strategy boils down to effective utilization of your resources, of which there are two types, human and material. So we're going to focus on material today, but before I do that, I'll briefly introduce human. So human is probably, much more significant, more important in warfare. And recruiting is a big part of getting human resources. Getting, smart, capable people. And then training them is a key factor. And then instilling discipline. But perhaps the most important factor in the human resource is morale, which is the will to fight. All right? And there's a number of elements that contribute to that. Perhaps the most important is small unit cohesion. Cohesion within the squad. All right? Cohesion between the guys you fight for, right next to you in the foxhole. All right, they support you, they keep you alive, you keep them alive, you form strong bonds with them. This is important. Next is regimental esprit. It's more of an attitude, more of a larger unit size attitude. The attitude of being war fighters, of being ass kickers. Alright, and then another thing is being attacked, or if you're not attacked, you manufacture a detonator, which is a manufactured incident, and it is portrayed as an offensive attack by the other opposition, right? Or propaganda, which is used quite often by many countries, including the USA, and nationalism, which has been a factor since the Napoleonic Wars. Fear-mongering always works. Manufacturing hate and xenophobia work too. Okay. On the material side, you have weapons design and production. All right, and these are a function of your fiscal capacity to finance this, how effective your weapons designs are, and your ability to produce them. All right, we'll see Russia is lacking in both of these. And then maintenance and repair. This is another area that Russia is lacking. So you got to maintain this. You got to keep it repaired. All right, whether it's weapons or whether it's transportation. All right. Now your transportation is important because that gives you logistic capacity. You know, supply capacity. And one of the guys that were really big on this was Dwight D. Eisenhower. Right. He really understood the strategic importance of logistics. All right, along with that, you have to have secure lines of communication. You don't just have to have the means of doing it. You have to have secure lines so all your ships and trucks, whatever, don't get whacked along the way. Don't get sunk by submarines or whatever. All right, now, after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, quote, the Russian defense industrial base essentially fell apart, along with the rest of society. You know, that was especially during the early Boris Yeltsin years. And currently, Russia's military industry falls well short of the West in terms of technology. For example, smart weapons, targeting pods, stealth technology, aircraft avionics, just as an example. So, Russia no longer has a shipyard capacity to build large surface ships and uses antiquated construction techniques for the ship they still build. And they're building smaller ships these days. When Russia's only aircraft carrier, the Admiral Kuznetsov, deploys, it belches copious black smoke and has to take along a tugboat due to a high rate of breakdowns in the high seas. Right? Now, according to the Royal Navy source, quote, we have had people on board Russian ships in the last 10 years or so, and it's always a bit of a shock. The conditions inside are pretty manky. All the ships look shiny on the outside, but are pretty hard on the inside. In addition, capital naval ships lack anti-submarine and anti-air escort vessels, requiring them to overload on multiple weapon systems, requiring multiple sensors and multiple operators, creating a high likelihood that a combined enemy attack, combined missile attack, air attack, surface ship attack, submarine attack, would overwhelm the ship's combat information center, leaving gaps in their defensive capabilities. No defensive depth. Now I say, compare that to the U.S. U.S. has extensive defense in depth. For example, if you have a carrier battle group, and here's an American supercarrier, this is a brand new Ford carrier, all right? Now, this carrier itself may not have much of a defensive weapon systems, all right? It'll have a little bit, right? But what it does is it relies upon all sorts of other ships. It's going to have Aegis cruisers. It's going to have all sorts of destroyers, like Arleigh Burke destroyers. It's going to have frigates for both anti-air and anti-submarine, right? It's going to have submarines. So there's going to be multiple layers of defense in depth with the U.S. Navy, which Russia doesn't enjoy. So the Russian fleet today consists mostly of Soviet leftovers that are, quote, outdated, prone to mechanical breakdowns, and wickedly uncomfortable for their crews, unquote. And they rarely set sail. Most of the time they just sit in port, largely because they break down a lot. There was a high rate of shipboard fires upon Russian ships, and Russia is building some small quantities of new ships, but they lack the shipyard capacity to build larger capital ships, like I said. All right, they're building some frigates, they're building some corvettes, which are basically a little bit larger than patrol boats, right? They're glorified patrol boats, and they built two modern amphibians. I think like 2019, 2020 or so, they have two more recent ones. But here's a key thing. Russia had to cancel their lighter class destroyer because they had fiscal shortages. They didn't have the money. And in their Navy, they only have 6 capital ships. And I say quote capital because, you know, you can't even call it capital. You could say they only have 1 capital ship, the Admiral Kuznetsov, which breaks down all the time, right? It's got 2 battle cruisers, Kirov class. I don't know if they still have the Kirov. I think they're both Kirov class. And they have 3 cruisers. That's it. We got 22 Ticonderoga class cruisers, which are kick-ass cruisers. So not only does Russia's only aircraft carrier break down often, it can only carry 24 fixed-wing aircraft, launched without catapults. All right, so it's got to take off the jump ramp, and because of that, you can't load up those planes with heavy weapons loads. So it's got limited weapons load, and the launch rate is slow, one at a time, cranking up. You know, no catapult assist. Now, the U.S., on the other hand, has 11 supercarriers, 10 Nimitz, and 1 Ford class. Ford's brand new, very high-tech. With another 4 Ford class carriers either under construction or on order. Each of these carry 90 aircraft. So roughly each of these 11 carry 4 times more aircraft than the Admiral Kuznetsov. Alright, in addition to that, the U.S. has 16 multi-purpose amphibious aircraft carriers that carry up to 20 F-35 stealth fighters. Alright, so that's 27 total above that, plus 4 coming online. Now, I say minus 4 because I'm willing to bet that as a 4 new Ford class come online, they'll probably retire, decommission some of the Nimitz. One for one. But that's still 11 super carriers to Russia's 1 crappy, broken down, half-ass carrier here. All right, now in addition to that, you got to look at NATO. All right, as far as fixed-wing aircraft carriers, France has 1, Britain has 2, Italy has 2, Spain has 1. All right. Turkey was going to have 1, but the F-35 B sale to Turkey was canceled. All right. So that's a 33-to-1 ratio if you look at NATO. 33 aircraft carriers to 1 crappy, broken down Russian carrier. And they can't make any more carriers. So that's not to include other ships and submarines, which far outclass the Russians. Other NATO ships. All right, and then you have to look at Russia's naval vulnerability. All right. So we said before that Russia is a landlocked nation, except for 3 maritime routes. Right. The one coming out of Murmansk. Right. It's got to run through the Greenland, Iceland, UK gap. The one coming out of St. Petersburg's got to run through the Baltic and then through the Cataract Straits. And then coming out of the Black Sea, whether it's Sea of Azov or right over here in Russia, it's got to go through the Black Sea, then go through the Bosphorus and Dardanelles. Each of these can be cut off with superior NATO naval power. Right? And the thing about it is, this is always overlooked. Right? They always have a scenario where you have a ground offensive. Russia's primarily a land military, all right, and they conquer some European nations, whatever, right? And what's often overlooked is the fact that a key part of the strategy would be to shut down Russia's economy. And you shut it down. One of the ways of shutting it down is you cut their commerce, which would be easy for the vastly superior NATO naval forces to do. All right, so this is an article I got from the Business Insider. It discusses 5 ways Russia's military is falling apart. I think that's the title of the article itself, actually. And one is planes falling out of the sky, which is true. Their planes have mechanical breakdowns, pilots having to eject. In fact, one of the brand new Su-57 fighter planes Russia's developing, it's their only stealth plane. They only have 10 prototypes, and one of them crashed already. Last December last year. All right, 2. Their only carrier needs a tug whenever it goes out to sea, and it cannot launch fully armed planes. 3. They have a heavy reliance on conscripts and soldiers forced into contracts. We'll talk about that in an upcoming section, right, as far as manpower weaknesses. All right, 4, failures during power display parades. You know those parades they have in front of the Kremlin, you know, the big open square there, right? We're all looking towards the stands, right? All the soldiers, and they're saluting whatever, and you know, and they're running their tanks, and they're running their trucks, they're running their big missile, you know, mobile missile carriers, whatever, right? Well, they have breakdowns, right? They got to call in a tow truck to go, haul it out, right? How embarrassing is that? All right, the funding situation is bad and getting worse. Now let's review the funding. So here is America's military budget for a year. This is like 2012 or 13, right? And here's Russia way down here, just a fraction of the U.S. In fact, the U.S. is bigger than the next 9 combined here. You got China, you got Britain, you got Japan, you got Saudi Arabia, and after Saudi Arabia you have Russia. And just ahead of Germany, then India, France, and Brazil. All right? And their fiscal ability to finance the military is based upon the size of their economy, right, to draw revenues from. All right? Now, their economy is measured by their GDP, right? USA is number 1 in the world at 19.4, then followed by China, Japan, Germany, Britain, India, France, Brazil, Italy, Canada. Then South Korea, tiny South Korea has a bigger economy than Russia. And if you look at California, California's economy alone is over twice as big as Russia, right? So the U.S. GDP is 13 times bigger than Russia. And that's the fundamental means of financing your military. All right, now during the Georgian and Chechen wars, Russian tanks were in disrepair. They broke down frequently, lacked reactive armor, and thus were highly vulnerable to primitive shoulder-fired anti-armor weapons like RPGs. Right? The explosives in the reactive armor were pilfered for sale. Roughly half of Russian tanks were T-62, or are T-62 and T-72s. These are 1960s T-62s, I guess, and 1970s era tanks, right? Their T-80s have had problems, especially in the Chechen War, shown to be problematic and vulnerable. And Russia only has about 519 T-90s, which are upgraded versions of the T-72. So this is just a advanced form of T-72, old tank, right? And the T-72s were proven to be easily destroyed by the M1 Abrams, you know, the modern Western tanks. You know, Challenger 2s, the British. Okay, now I got to mention the T-14 Armada because people, if I don't mention this, people are going to say, oh, you intentionally left that out. Well, here's the thing about the T-14 Armada. This is their brand new, most modern main battle tank. Right? It's automated as far as like auto gun load, and it's only got a 3-man crew. All right, looks like it can be very capable, but you know, I guess the jury's still out on this tank until it sees combat. All right, and the thing about it is, they have no combat-ready vehicles ready. They only have a handful of prototypes, just like they have a handful of Su-57s. They got 10 minus 1 because 1 crashed. Su-57s. They just have a handful of prototype Armada tanks. That's it. No mass production has started yet. The majority of Russian forces currently fighting in Syria are still using Soviet-dated 1970s hardware. And they got aircraft problems. For example, here's a quote. The Russian Air Force, for example, is buying small numbers of modern combat aircraft built in boutique-sized batches. The country is building Su-30M2s, Su-30SMs, Su-35Ss, Su-34s, which are all derivatives of the same basic Su-27 flanker airframe, but don't share a lot of parts commonality, and that complicates maintenance and repair logistics. It's also buying MiG-29 derivatives. For example, the MiG-35 is basically a warmed-over MiG-29, which add to the problem. Russia is also starting to develop at least 3 new types of aircraft, but it's not clear how they'll pay for such expensive programs. All right. So I think the reason why they rename the number designation for basically an advanced model is they're trying to increase sales. Give the impression it's a brand new aircraft when it's basically just worked over, slightly improved old Su-27 or old MiG-29. All right. Now, in early 2006, Russia integrated its aviation companies into a single state-owned holding, the United Aviation Building Corporation, which has proved to be a failure, incapable of innovation and adaptation. An example is Russia's failed attempt at a fifth-generation fighter, stealth fighter, fifth generation of stealth, the Su-57, whose production suffered cost overruns and design development problems, including engine problems. They still have engine problems, developing the engine for that. There's questionable stealth. All right, it's more than questionable. It's pretty known to be. I read a RAND Corporation, the same RAND Corporation report. It said it's roughly comparable to the stealth version of the F-15 and the stealth version of the Navy F-18, right? Roughly comparable to that. Especially from behind with its two-dimensional thrust vectoring nozzles. In fact, the Su-57 was being developed in partnership with India, but in 2018, India pulled out of the project. They pulled the plug because the Su-57 did not meet requirements for stealth, combat, avionics, radars, and sensors, which is classic for Russia to lag behind here, to have inferior electronics. So here is a report on avionics from the RAND Corporation. Quote, successful development of these advanced avionics has and will continue to be a major challenge for the Russian A&D industries. The Russian Federation A&D industries have a legacy of unsuccessful attempts to absorb the full fruits of the post-Cold War revolution in information technology. All right. Currently, Russia has only 10 minus 1 Su-57 prototypes. All right. They're not the combat-ready models yet. They're prototypes. However, in 2019, Putin announced an order for 76 Su-57s to be delivered by the end of 2028. Only the first Su-57 was recently delivered. It was only days ago, actually, like December 28th of 2020. All right, they got their first Su-57. All right, now here's a note to show you the difference in fighter aircraft capability. One aircraft, the U.S. F-15 Eagle, this aircraft right here. Here's Su-57. Here's F-35. Now, one aircraft, F-15, has a kill ratio of 104 to 0. All right, no losses. That's perfect record. Mostly against Russian aircraft, Russian Soviet aircraft. So this is a huge ratio. I mean, if you look at the ratio numerically, it's infinite, right? Anything divided by 0 isn't. Well, I mean, that's an exaggeration, but it's large. And this is largely due to superior avionics, like I discussed here, right? As the RAND Corporation discussed here. Radar, weapons guidance, and missiles. And this Russian shortfall is further increased with F-35. For example, I mean, we're further outdistancing them. For example, F-35 has a very sophisticated infrared search and tracking system, right? With six sensors mounted around the plane to give spherical, it's not just 360, it's spherical all-around coverage, right? And with a range of detection that successfully tracked ballistic missiles at over 800 miles away. Now, ballistic missiles are pumping a lot of heat, and fighter planes are going to pump out heat. depending upon whether or not they're an afterburner, or depending upon how much fuel they're pumping out, how much thrust they're pumping out, what speed they're running, right? Okay. But this is 800 miles away, right? That's insane ranges for infrared. Also, U.S. and Allied aircraft had advanced networking capability, so they communicate with each other. They share data. There's a data link. And Russia doesn't benefit from this level of dynamic connectivity. Again, that's the same RAM report, right? And this is huge because this increases situational awareness. A major factor in combat effectiveness is situational awareness, especially in air combat, which has been proven throughout the history of air combat that the guy who sees the other guy first usually wins. You get to jump on the other guy. You pull in behind in his six, whatever, right? So it's usually the guy who sees the other guy first that wins in aerial combat. Right? And that helps with this network capability, which Russia lacks. Though the only advantage the Su-57 may have over the F-35 will probably be maneuverability. Well, I'm sure maneuverability, because this has thrust vectoring. That gives it added maneuverability. And speed, it's a little bit faster. This is Mach 2. This is Mach 1.6. Right? But these advantages are far outweighed by superior avionics and networking, data linking. And finally, remember the real existing evidence of effectiveness. This is the data evidence you have. 104 to 0 for the F-15. Right? Proven U.S. aircraft far greater effectiveness than Russian, Soviet. Russian ground vehicles are notoriously prone to breakdowns, including tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, armored personnel carriers, and trucks. This is compounded by wide diversity in vehicle types, just like the wide diversity in aircraft types, making it hard to get repair parts to keep them running. Same thing is with their ground vehicles, making logistical support of repair parts problematic, threatening maneuver warfare, threatening logistics supply capability. All right. Now, each of its last three wars, Russia suffered logistical problems, causing shortages of ammunition, food, fuel, and repair parts. In a proxy war with the West, supply convoys will be vulnerable to hit-and-run attacks by guerrilla forces, especially if trained, equipped, with equipment and weapons, and provided intelligence by Western special forces. Right? I mean, they're just going to whack these Russian convoys. A nation's economy is the basis of military power, and Russia has the 12th largest GDP, behind South Korea and just ahead of Australia, and less than half as large as California alone. The U.S. economy is 13 times larger than Russia's. Russia has the 6th largest defense budget, behind Saudi Arabia. Right? It is having problems purchasing ships, problems purchasing its brand new fighter planes, which are half-assed as they are, and having trouble purchasing its brand new main battle tank. Right? Insufficient quantities. Right? In fact, they have none yet. They just have prototypes here, prototypes there. Well, they just delivered the first Su-57. That's it. So, let's look at some numbers. Russia has 10 Su-57s, minus 1, right? Which is a faulty program to begin with, a program which India bailed out of because it was failing. And they have 76 on order to be delivered by 2028. Now, compare that with F-35. This is only one of two of our stealth fighters. We also have the F-22. But this is the one we're building now. We have 595 of these built already, with another 2,456 on order, right? And plus there's 14 other countries who have either received or have ordered F-35s, right? For a grand total of 3,882. So compare 76 to 3,882. Right? Now, if you look at just NATO, you're comparing 76 Su-57s to 3,200 or 3,621 F-35s. That's 48 F-35s for every Su-57, and each F-35 is superior to every Su-57. That's overkill. That's way overkill. The same situation is similar for their T-14 Armata tank, which has not begun mass production, with Russia possessing only a handful of prototypes. That's it. Just like the Su-57. A big factor in this is Russia can't afford stuff. Now compare that with the U.S. most advanced main battle tank, the M1 Abrams. We have 5,000 in active service, another 3,000 in storage. We also have a bunch of M60s. I don't know if they're being used still, M60s. They can be used by reserve units. I know we used M60s in the first Gulf War. I don't know if they're still used. Anyway, we have 5,000 of these, 3,000, 8,000 total, right? They don't have any ready to go combat-ready Armada tanks. They just have prototypes. So here's the Armada. Here's the M1. Now, in addition to that, you got to look at NATO tanks, right? There's very capable NATO tanks. All of these, very capable. Challenger 2, Britain, right? Leopard 2. This is a kick-ass tank. Germany. Leclerc, France. There's Eret. That's Italy. And then Turkey has a capable tank, the Alte tank, right? So you're looking at being overwhelmed. Russia being overwhelmed. They don't even have mass production of their T-14s yet. Also recall fixed-wing aircraft carrier advantage 33 to 1, right? Also recall the proven track record of past battle performance, Russian versus Soviet weapons. F-15, 104 to 0, right? M1 Abrams just whacked Soviet tanks like crazy in the Iraq War, right? In both Iraq Wars. And for example, in Desert Storm, there was no M1 Abrams tank destroyed. A few were hit by small arms, I believe rocket-propelled grenades, right? But none of them were destroyed. And they just tore up the Soviet tanks in Iraq possession. First night of the air war in Gulf, you had massive destruction of Iraqi air defense capability and command and control. All right. So here's a summary. Russia lags behind in many areas. They lag behind in military funding, very poor. Financial ability, right? Small GDP. Technology, they're always lagging behind the technology. Big numerical deficit in terms of high-end modern weapons, stealth aircraft, main battle tanks, and aircraft carriers. Big deficit in naval numerical deficit, right? Across the board. Not just aircraft carriers, but in cruisers. They have a lot of small ships, corvettes. Right, that's it. Especially fixed-wing aircraft carriers. Shipyard capacity and antiquated construction techniques limited. Heavy reliance on old Soviet-era equipment. Old ships in disarray, breaking down, catching fire. A proven record of high equipment breakdown. Poor logistics for maintenance and repair, complicated by high variation in equipment models without parts commonality. Right? And all of this will cause logistical failure. A logistical nightmare and logistical failure. All right? So once again, Russia is lagging behind. We identified some factors in the material aspects of military force. Weapons design, lacking behind. Production volume, lacking behind. Maintenance and repair, sorely lacking behind. All right? Transportation, the logistics capacity, poor. Right? All right, so finally, how will this be attacked? With a big dumbass wave saying, I don't see it that way. Looky here, look at this one little thing. People will try to find some, little nitpick fact check, and they'll probably be wrong. They probably won't understand, if it's like news media. You get some idiot reporter, trying to understand military things. They're not going to understand what's really going on, the details of military equipment. They'll come out with some bogus, lying fact check, all right? Or, they'll fixate on some minor little thing, right? So liars will try to shift all focus off of the facts onto a single point attack, right? You can't deny this stuff, right? All this stuff, you can't deny GDP. You can't deny aircraft carrier numbers, right? You can't deny, the quality of aircraft carrier, right? All these things you can't deny. They'll try to nitpick something. And then shift all focus onto that and say, see, it's all bullshit. That's what they're going to try. And then make a big wave of it. And it's going to work because 99.999% of the masses will retain not a single fact. All they will have in their heads is the simple, stupid crap being passed in a 10-second blurb that they can read on their phone, written at the 4th grade level that any retard can understand, and being whipped up into a big wave of social reality. So, contest all my facts or shut the F up. Don't nitpick, e.g., phased array radar or whatever, some bogus thing. Then have that define everything in your mind because you've forgotten everything else. Okay? Alright. So, Soviet military preparedness is sorely lacking. Alright, for all these reasons. Fundamental reasons, like they can't pay for it. Alright? Their technology's lacking.